continue our 2012 one-on-one series of interviews is presidential candidate and former Pennsylvania Senator Rick Santorum. Senator, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Thank you, Brett. Good to be with you.
Let's talk the economy. Let's say it's President Santorum in office right now. What specific things would you do to create jobs, increase growth, calm the markets, but with the caveat that you could get it through this divided Congress right now?
Yeah, you make the assumption that Rick Santorum wins the presidency. We're probably going to control the United States Senate. We're only 3 votes short right now, and I feel pretty good that with 23 of the 33 seats up being Democrats held seats, we're going to pick up a few seats. Given that as a preference, we're going to repeal Obamacare. That's the first thing. Creating a certainty in the marketplace that we're not going to put this huge new entitlement, this huge amount of taxes and burden on the business community, I think will do go first step number one to solve the problem. Secondly, we need to do something to revitalize what I consider to be sort of the core of America, which is our manufacturing base. I've talked about this on the road really more than anybody else. I come from a little steel town north of Pittsburgh, and I believe that the real middle of America that has shrunk is because we went from about 21% of jobs in this country when I was a kid being in manufacturing down to 9%. That's what we've lost those jobs overseas. We need to bring them back. One big idea that I've proposed is to cut the corporate tax for all manufacturers from 35% to 0%. You want to get jobs back in this country. You create a tax system that allows us not only to make things here and compete here and be profitable here, but one of the big impediments to manufacturing here is our tax system doesn't match up with other tax systems around the world. As a result, it's harder to export here. You cut the tax rate to 0%, you create a real launching pad for exports here in America.
Yeah, but how do you assume, or how do you know that those companies are going to put back in to the country and create those jobs if there's not something attached to it?
Well, you only get the corporate tax rate if you're manufacturing here. So, I mean, it's not like you're going to cut the corporate tax for manufacturers if they manufacture in China. No, if you have to manufacture here in America to get the 0% rate. And that, to me, is a very, very powerful incentive. There's other things that we're going to do. Talk about energy. That's a very big part. Pennsylvania is now having a boomlet because of the Marcellus Shale and the gas industry there. We're going to drill 3,000 to 4,000 wells in Pennsylvania this year, gas wells. We're enormous economic activity in the rural parts of our state. We need to do that in other areas to do 2 things. Number 1, to create jobs in the energy sector. But number 2, to create a stability for the manufacturing sector. The fact that we now have stable gas prices, and probably will for quite some time, is a great incentive for manufacturers to come back because they're one of the heaviest users of natural gas.
What makes you more qualified than anyone else in this current field to create jobs or to turn this economy around?
Because right behind you there, I've gotten things done. I mean, that's the real difference between me and everybody else in this race, is accomplishment in a tough environment and to get conservative things accomplished. One of the other things we're going to have to do is we're going to have to cut the size and scale of government. We are headed toward almost 40 to 50% of the overall economy being government if we don't do something about these entitlement programs. That's the big problem. There's only one person in this race who's actually worked and fought and succeeded in passing entitlement reform, welfare reform back in the mid-90s. I was the author of it when I was in the House of Representatives on the Ways and Means Committee. Then when I came to the Senate, I went toe-to-toe with Daniel Patrick Moynihan, Ted Kennedy, the lions of the left, who were going to defend that system. Bill Clinton, who did not want to end the federal entitlement to welfare. He vetoed it twice. But we continued to work on it and was able to end the federal entitlement, require work, and put time limits on welfare, something that we're going to have to do for Medicaid, something we're going to have to do for housing benefits, food stamps, all of these programs that are growing exponentially, that are the core problem with our deficit, are things that I was able to accomplish when I was in the United States Senate. Nobody else is able to do that in this field.
Vice President Biden is in China. He delivered a keynote address in which, in part, he passed some blame to the, quote, strong voice within the Republican Party that prevented an even bigger deal on deficit and debt reduction. Your reaction to that?
My reaction is the biggest thing we can do to reduce the deficit is get the economy growing. And the last thing you want to do if you want the economy growing is to increase taxes on the job creators. And so what we're trying to help, Joe. I mean, we're trying to help you. We're trying to get this economy going by doing some things that actually create private sector growth. And the response we get from the left time and time again is, no, we need more government, we need more spending, we need more taxes, which is the reason we're in the problem we're in today.
Foreign policy. Senator Santorum, a few weeks ago you called President Obama's policy in Syria, quote, slapping the back of the hand of President Assad instead of going after him. Now, as you know, the administration has called for Assad to step down. But would President Santorum go after Assad with U.S. military action?
Well, I wouldn't say with U.S. military action, but certainly from the very beginning, I would have called for Assad to step down. This is something that President Obama did with respect to one of our closest allies in the Middle East, Egypt. You had Hosni Mubarak, who was a friend, not clearly a dictator, but a friend, someone who was in a stable peace relationship with Israel and the United States. And as soon as the riots got anywhere intense, he immediately called for Mubarak's removal. He's done the opposite with Syria, which has been a thorn in the United States side, obviously a thorn in the side of the Israelis. And I'm someone who actually has experience in this. I authored a bill, helped pass it through the United States Senate called the Syrian Accountability Act, which actually did help get Syria out of Lebanon, which was a threat to Israel and its northern border. So I have experience in this area. I've been successful in getting things passed through the Congress to put some constraints on Syria, and we should have done the same thing in this case.
In Libya, it appears the rebels are now surrounding Tripoli. There's a call by Muammar Gaddafi's government for a ceasefire this morning, but they're under heavy attack. How much role, if any, should the U.S. play in a post-Gaddafi Libya?
Well, this is another strategic area and strategic country in the area. And obviously, we should be very much engaged with these rebel forces. We've now taken sides as a result of the Obama administration's policy. Now we need to maximize our influence within this group. So hopefully that's going on right now. Hopefully we're developing relationships, we're building bridges to that rebel regime, and when they come into power, that we will have some influence and some ability to be able to work with them to establish a stable regime in Libya.
Let's talk politics. Senator Santorum, the last time you ran for office as an incumbent from Pennsylvania, you spent $26 million on that race. You still lost by 18 points.
Yeah.
This year, you're an underdog with relatively little money, that's fair to say.
Yeah.
For Republicans whose main concern is to defeat President Obama in 2012, aren't there several other candidates who realistically stand a better chance of doing that than you do?
Yeah, I mean, what people look at is the last race I ran, which was a miserable election year for Republicans. We lost 5 congressmen. We lost the governor's race by over 20 points. We lost the House of Representatives by the worst margin since the Great Depression. It was a meltdown in Pennsylvania, as it was in a lot of the mid-Atlantic states, and I got swept out with everybody else. George Bush was about 36% favorable on Election Day in Pennsylvania that day. I mean, it was a miserable year. Go back and look at the other years where we were competitive. In 2000, George Bush lost the state of Pennsylvania by 4 points. I won it by 5. In 1994, I defeated a Democratic incumbent to win my Senate seat, again, in a state that had over 1 million more registered Democrats than Republicans. And in my previous 2 congressional races, I defeated a Democratic incumbent to get elected, and I forced another Democratic incumbent out and won in a 70% Democratic district. So, yeah, in a horrible election year, which is unlike any election year we've seen in Pennsylvania in a long time, and nothing like the election year in 2012, I did poorly. But if you look at the track record, it's a pretty darn good one. And if you look at the polls today in Pennsylvania, I'm dead even. I'm the only person in this race, other than Mitt Romney, who's, been out there campaigning for a long time, who is dead even with the president in Pennsylvania.
Here's what you said after our debate in Ames, Iowa.
Last night I was on Greta's show, and I said that I would get tougher questions from Anna Mosa at a town meeting than I would from Bret Baier, which I wasn't sure that I didn't get any questions from Bret Baier.
Now, besides ripping on my questioning there, you were not happy about the timing and the number of questions. Now, let me say, the official tally had you right in the middle of the pack, getting 10 questions, talking for 9 minutes, 12 seconds. That was just 55 seconds behind Governor Romney over the 2 hours, who used the most time. Do you think your performance in that debate affected the straw poll or your standings in this race?
There's no question on 2 fronts. I mean, obviously, the questions I did get later in the debate definitely helped me. I had a lot of people came up to me and said that the questions I answered was one of the reasons they voted for me. The complaint I had was in the first roughly hour of debate, I think I got 1 question. I got a lot at the end, but and most of them were geared towards social issues. And again, it's one of those things where you sort of get pigeonholed as a candidate. And I think if you talk the conversation we had today My record on national security is better than anybody in this race, far exceeds anybody in this race. My record on moral cultural issues far exceeds anybody in this race. And if you look at my record on entitlement reform, there's nobody that can touch my record. And those are the things I'd love to be talking about, particularly in the area of health care reform and taxes.
In 2008, you called Governor Romney the candidate who will, quote, stand up for the conservative principles we hold dear.
Yeah.
A month ago in Iowa, you suggested to Iowa voters that they should pick someone they really like, just not Romney.
Right.
But in 2008, didn't you really like Romney? I mean, what's different now?
Yeah, I endorsed Governor Romney 5 days, I think 6 days before he dropped out of the race. I endorsed him right after the Florida primary, when it looked like it was going to be a choice between Governor Romney and John McCain. And in that race, I really felt anybody but McCain was the best solution. I mean, nothing against John McCain personally, but I just didn't think he was going to be our best candidate in the fall. It turned out to be that way. And so he was the alternative, and that's why I chose him. I had concerns. Obviously, I didn't endorse him until 5 days before Super Tuesday. But my biggest concern then, and it is now, is Romney Care and the fact that he was for a top-down, government-run health care solution. I don't care if it's the state level. I don't care if it's in the township he lives in. We should not be for government-run health care or top-down solutions to big problems like that.
Last thing, Texas Governor Rick Perry is obviously getting a lot of attention in this race since he's thrown his hat in the ring. Does he have what it takes to be the GOP nominee?
Look, I'd be out of the race if I thought he was the best candidate. I think I'm the best candidate for this, who has a record of accomplishment across the board, who's been a consistent conservative. I think you'd go back and look at the records of all the candidates in this race, the one who can accomplish things, who's been a consistent conservative, and someone who can attract candidates. I mean, Rick Perry's won in Texas. That's great. We're going to win Texas no matter who the nominee is. But we're going to have to win Pennsylvania and Ohio and Florida. I've got the track record to win in those states.
Senator Santorum, thanks for the time.
Thank you, Brett.